Hi, welcome to another episode of the Command Line class. This episode is brought to you by the letters D, O, and S, and for the word no, as in no, I don't want to learn this. Which brings up, why do you need to learn this? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One, the primary reason for most of you probably is troubleshooting. When you can get to the command line and the Windows graphic system isn't working, you'll have a way to get in, get people's files out, or to fix things or change things. If you're going to be a server administrator, the command line is going to be your friend, since this will help you automate things, do things a bit quicker sometimes, and there are a couple of other reasons that I point out in the Part 1 PowerPoint. For instance, Windows Server 2012 allows you to install it without any kind of graphical interface. All you are doing is typing in things from the command line. So, depending on what you're going to be doing, there are several different reasons, good reasons why you need to learn the command line. Now, what we're going to be doing in this video is you're going to be learning the basics of the command line finally. But we're going to start with how you can modify the command line window to make it a little bit easier to work with for you. So, I've already got the command prompt app pinned to my taskbar, so I'm going to open that up. And I should point out at this point that I may go back and forth and talk about the command prompt window or the command line window. I usually call it the command line window. Either way, command prompt window, command line window, we're talking about the same thing. Now, to change some of the options of the window itself, you right-click on the title bar and you select Properties. Now, one of the first things I want to point out is at the bottom here, where you have an OK button and a Cancel button. Now, usually in Windows dialog boxes, you also have a third button called Apply, which allows you to make changes, apply those changes without closing the window. Unfortunately, the command line properties, command prompt properties window doesn't give you that option. So, that brings up a problem. If you make changes in one tab, then go to another tab and make some changes and decide, well, I don't want to keep those changes. If you click Cancel, you're going to lose everything you've changed in any of the tabs. So if you make some changes, decide you don't want those changes, you'll have to manually set everything back the way it was. Otherwise, when you do make changes, excuse me, you click OK, and the window goes away. All right, so let me right-click this. Now, our first tab here, Options. The top here you have Cursor Size option. Now, I had been playing around with this before I started making the video, and I had set the cursor size to be large. So let me close the window here and show you what we're talking about. This blinking item here is called the cursor. It marks where you can start typing in commands on the command line. And you can have it small, medium, or large. Large just simply means it is the full height of the text that you see around it. So if you look at this, it's the full height of my capital M's here. So a lot of times you may not want that. And you can certainly go medium or small. Medium is half the height, and then small, and I'll click OK again, just simply has what appears to be like an underline blinking, and that's where I usually have it set to anyway. So I'm going to leave it like that when we get back in. Excuse me. Now, the other problem here is the command prompt properties also always open in the upper left corner of the command prompt window. I want to move it over to the middle here. There's nothing you can do to change that, so I'm just going to have to deal with it. We won't be in the properties window that long anyway. The second item here is called command history. Now, when you're typing commands in and executing those commands, the command prompt or command line window keeps track of the commands and creates a history for you. Right now, the buffer size is basically going to store about 50 commands, and I'm going to leave that. The number of buffers, 4, is basically the number of memory locations dedicated to maintaining your command history. I haven't come up with a reason to make it bigger, but I suppose if you're going to be in the command prompt for a really long time, this is the only way you interact with the operating system, then yeah, you'd want to make the number of buffers bigger, and of course the buffer size bigger as well. Now, if you've used Linux, you're used to when you get done with your current session and you log out and you come back, you still have access to all your previous commands. That's not the way it is with the command prompt. Once you close that window, you lose the command history. So, but while you have the window open, it'll keep adding to your command history. So that's, again, if you're used to Linux, that's one of the things you have to get used to in the Windows world. Now, the checkbox here, discard old duplicates, it's unchecked right now, but what it does is if you check this, if you type in a command another time exactly the way you typed it in a previous time, it won't keep that in the command history. I believe what it does is it keeps the most recent version of that, so you don't have to go back in the command history looking for that previous command. Now, it has to be exactly the same way with the same options or switches, as you'll learn they're called a little bit later. So generally I just leave this unchecked. Again, this is a personal preference. You can check it or not as you need to. Now, the edit options is currently set with insert mode checked. What that indicates is when you edit a command you've typed in, any edits you make to the command will be inserted instead of typed over the command. And a little bit later I'll be showing you how to edit the command. But I'm going to leave this checked as insert mode. I've never been a fan of overtype or type over. The quick edit mode by default is unchecked, and what that allows you to do is if you have something in the command window you would like to copy and then paste into another program, the quick edit mode allows you to do that. But here's the problem. It does not allow you to copy things from another program into the command line. So generally speaking, I usually leave that unchecked unless I really have something that I'm going to need to copy out of the command prompt window into, say, Word or a text editor to keep track of a problem or something. All right, the next tab, Font, changes the height and width of the text that appears in the command prompt window. So right now I have it set by 12 by 16. 16 is the height, 12 is the width. This is how you can also have your text appear larger so it's easier to read. If I remember correctly, I think the default size is 8 by 8. Now, generally speaking, I leave the raster fonts selected here. You can play around with the other fonts, but you notice you don't have a huge amount of fonts to play with. You just have 2 others. Again, you can play around with this. I'm not going to do that at this time. Once you select one of the other fonts, you could check the bold font, so whatever appears on the screen is bold. Again, you can play around with that and see if you like it or not. Generally speaking, I don't. And then down here at the window, The changes you make here for size and in the font are demonstrated down here so you can see kind of in the little window what it's going to look like after you click OK. Now, for layout, you've got three different types of options. The buffer size just simply indicates the width of the characters that it's going to save in the buffer, and you can think of this as being the number of characters on a line it will save, in this case 80. Now for the height, that indicates pretty much the number of lines it's going to save. And yes, you need to change both this item and the item in options if you're going to modify any of this. Now the window size, that's how you can change the width of the window. Now normally when you're dealing with windows in the Windows graphical system, you can make them as big, small, wide, high as you want. Not this window. You can make it as as tall as you want, but you can't make it as wide as you want. So if you want the window to be wider, you actually have to give it a number here. I've got the width set to 80, which is what gives me the width of this window here. The height is 43 right now, basically 43 lines. That I can simply change by dragging it down or dragging it up to make it taller. Now the window position currently has a check mark, let the system position the window. It's going to position when you open it in the upper left hand corner, but you can drag the window wherever you want. So if you really find that annoying though, you can change the positions. The left means the left upper corner, and the top means where the top part is of the window. Again, once it opens, you can move the window wherever you want anyway. So again, this is personal preference. Like I said, if you find it annoying to always have to move it to a particular spot, you can change these numbers, play around for something that you like better. Colors. You've actually got 4 different settings for colors here. Screen text means the text you're reading right here, this, for instance, Microsoft Windows, is set to black. So let me select the radio button for that. And down here, it's hard to see, but the black square here has a border around it indicating that I've selected black for the screen text. Now, you can modify these numbers manually in here, which gives you more control over certain types of colors, or you can select a predefined color down here. Now for the screen background, I've got it set to bright white, which is this item over here, which I really just simply selected that. Notice that the numbers are now 255 in all 3, red, green, or blue. By the way, 255 is the max number. So black is the absence of color, so all those values were 0. And white is the maximum color you could have for all the different mixed colors, red, green, and blue. So that's why this is all maxed out to 255. If you select intermediate color like gray, you'll notice that the numbers change. They're about half of 255, since gray is about half of that. And then blues or whatever you want are changed appropriately. This is now totally 255. But notice if you see down here, it changes this box to give you an idea of what it's going to look like when you change to that color. Again, you can change it to whatever you want, but be careful. Some colors work better together than other colors. Now, pop-up text is there's certain options you can use with the command line window that will end up popping up an extra window. Again, pop-up text. So you can change the text and the background of that particular window. And you'll get to see this a little bit later when I talk about keyboard shortcuts. So you can modify that to whatever you want. And down here at the bottom, it's already demonstrating what the colors are set to for any pop-up windows. So this is currently set to white with kind of a purple text. All right, now, whenever you make changes to the window using the Properties dialog box, those changes will be saved even after you close out the window, after you close the window. What you'll find is there's another command called color that I'll demonstrate later, where you can change the colors of the text and background of the main window. You can use that command instead, but when you use that command, it doesn't save the changes to another window. So it doesn't save it after you've closed out the window and then use them when you open up a new window. Only the Properties dialog box does that. All right. So finally, we can start talking about actually using commands. So let me close this dialog out. Now, I talked previously about there's two different types of modes you can be in. User mode or administrator mode. And that the command prompts will look different. I'm not quite sure if I use the words command prompt. But by command prompt, I'm talking about this item here. The other information here is just miscellaneous information, but this indicates where you can start typing commands in. And later on I'll show you a command that will allow you to change what is displayed here. But for right now, what is displayed is your current drive and then your home directory. Now we'll talk about directories in part 3, as I talked about in one of the earlier videos, is that directories and folders are essentially the same thing. It's just that when you're dealing with the command line, generally speaking, you call them directories instead of folders. Although using the word folder isn't wrong. Now, when you have the command prompt, and you want to type in your commands, in the PowerPoint and when you look up information on the internet, it'll show the command all in uppercase. For instance, if I type in the command DATE, that will allow me to both display the display the date, and I can also use it to change the date. But date is one of those commands, along with another command I'll show a little bit later called time, that you have to be in administrator mode in order to actually change the date or the time. So what I really want to demonstrate here is when you type in the date and you press enter, it's going to do something. In this case, it displays the current date and then wants to know what you want the new date to be. Now, if you don't really want to change the date and we can't change it in user mode, which is the mode I'm in right now, all we need to do is just simply press the enter key and it doesn't change, just keeps the old date. Now, what I wanted to demonstrate though, with commands, you don't always have to type them in uppercase. You can type them in lowercase, you get the same effect. I can even type the beginning letter in uppercase and the rest in lowercase, and it all works. So even though in the PowerPoint I have the commands in uppercase, and when you look at information on the internet you'll see the commands in uppercase, that's not how you have to type them in. Now, when you're working with command line, the command line window uses spaces to separate options and information from the actual command. And as I'll talk about in a little bit, In the Windows command line, options are called switches. But first off, I just want to demonstrate one switch that the date command has, and it happens to be the only switch, although other commands could have quite a few switches. In order to separate the command from its switch, you type a space, then you type a slash, denoting the fact that you're now going to type in some kind of switch. And switches modify the behavior of commands. So the only switch available to date is the T command. And what's weird about the date and time command is, yes, the /T command, which is also the switch for the time command, modifies the behavior of the command, but that's not what's weird. What's weird is when you type date or time, it doesn't just simply tell you the date and time and then use a switch to modify the date and time. Now, it uses the switch to actually display the date or time without asking you to modify it. So now with the /T switch, I simply press enter and it just simply displays the date without asking me if I want to modify it. But at any rate, switches modify the behavior of the command somehow. Whether you like the way it modifies the command or not is really irrelevant. You basically need to know that particular switch is going to modify the command in a particular way. Now, as I demonstrated before, is you don't always have to type in a switch, and most commands don't require a switch, but when you use a switch, they modify the behavior of the command. Now, how do you find out what kind of switches you have available? Well, there is a help system, and there's two ways to bring up help for a particular command. The classic way of doing this is typing in the help switch, which is a slash followed by a question mark. And when you do that, it displays the information and possible switches for that command. And there's not a lot of help for the date command, but it follows the regular format by the first thing is it gives a synopsis of what the command's for, a little summary. Then it gives you the name of the command again, all in capitals, followed by any switches and then possible options or other information you can supply to the command. Now, in this case, there's two possible things you can supply to the date command. You can supply the /T switch, and then there's a bar here. The bar indicates that you have an OR situation. So you can supply the switch /T, or you can supply a date on the same line as the command. So for instance, I can type date 8/29/15 and then hit enter, and if I were in administrator mode, that would allow me to change the date without having to go through the prompt. And the same thing with the time command as well. Alright, now the rest of the information for help tells you how to use the date command and then how to use any switches. Now, since there's only one switch for this command, it gives you a little paragraph talking about that switch. But if there's a lot of switches a command has, what you'll see is a column format, and I'll be typing in another command shortly to demonstrate that. But you'll have a column format with the switches and their names listed on the left, and then a description of what the switch does on the right. So, a little editing information. If you've got a command up and you made a mistake, you can just backspace over it. And now I'm going to type a command. Don't worry about this command right now, but what it does is it lists all the items that are in a particular directory. It's called dir. And I'm going to use the classic help command switch. And it follows the same format as the date. It gives me a short synopsis of what the command is for, then all the different possible switches. And this is the column format I was talking about. The first column is the actual switch. Then on the right column, it tells you what the name of the switch is and a little bit of description. I'm sorry, earlier I had said on the left you'd have the description, but the description is on the right. Okay, now, the other way that you can get help is simply type the command help followed by, let me bring the window up a little bit, and I'm typing down here, help followed by whatever the command is. So in this case I'm going to do help dir, and I get the exact same information. Now, depending on your size of your window, the help information may or may not display one screen at a time. Some of the help information for commands is formatted so it will display one screen at a time if it requires that. Other help information for other commands has been formatted so it just displays everything all at once. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason, but I just wanted to warn you of that. Now, if you happen to get help information that does display all at once and doesn't pause, what you can do is you can use your scroll bar over here, and you can go backwards and look at the help information. Or if you've used a command and the command itself displays a lot of information, you can scroll up or down to display that information. Now, let me scroll back down here. Okay, there's my command prompt. All right, so I've tried to type in the date command with the /t switch, and I obviously didn't type correctly. So what do? Well, you've already seen that I can backspace over, but you can also use your left and right arrow keys to simply move the cursor over and type in the correct character. Now, right here is where I would type an E, and notice it moves everything over because we're in insert mode. And then I can use the arrow key to go back to F, backspace, and press T, and we're set. Now, what happens if we briefly need to be in type over mode? Well, you can use the insert key on your keyboard to toggle back and forth between type over and insert mode. And I'm running Windows here in emulation, so to actually get insert, I need to go up to my keyboard menu here and actually select insert. So let me do that now. So clicking insert toggles me into type over mode. So as I'm moving back, I can go where if I need to make a change like here, and that's what I mean by type over mode. It simply types over that particular letter. Now be careful, you've either got insert or you've got type over. It doesn't combine the two, and it doesn't go away until you press the insert again. So if I do this, I've now typed over my T and it becomes a D. So you could accidentally start typing over your entire characters without realizing it. So that's pretty much why I don't like type over mode, because if I forget, then I've really got to fix a lot of stuff. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to change this back into insert. And so now I need to backspace, put my T back in, and everything works the way it should. Now you can also use the delete key to delete things rather than the backspace key. So if I get to the E here where I should have an A, I can press delete, delete that, type in the A. Then I'll just move over and I'll add this. Now, a couple of other keys that you can use for editing the commands is you might know these from using them when you're editing documents like in Word or some other text editor. But you have the Home and the End key on your keyboard, and they work the same on the command line as they do for editing documents. If you press Home, the cursor goes to the beginning of the line. If you press End, the cursor goes to the end of a line. So if you've got changes that need to be at the beginning of a command or near the beginning of the command, you can save yourself a little bit of time. Rather than using the left arrow, you can just simply use the Home key. Now, you can also use this too is if you need to make changes and then get back to the end of a command because you need to add another switch or something, then you can use the End to do that as well.